Oh, we want to say hello to you. We are live now on Facebook. This is Universal Heart Wisdom. And I created this show because I'm realizing in these times it is so important for us to see what brings us together as a humanity, what creates more unity in us, how can we awaken to the higher frequencies of unity and really awaken to our soul nature and purpose. And we are sponsored by the Love Coach Academy. So we want to thank Scott Thomas for creating this. And it's all about compassionate communications, empathy, and learning all sorts of skills for how we communicate in relationships to avoid triggers and find really the heart wisdom of diplomacy. I am a love coach. I'm a Sufi healer. I am a healthy lifestyle coach, working with people's nutrition and lifestyle, getting more exercise and finding really healthy ways to live during these times. And I lead retreats in many different places around the world. So I want to have my co-host, Kamila, introduce herself, and then I will be introducing our guest. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kamila Love. You'll find me on Facebook under the name Kamila Peace. And I am delighted to be hosting with Deborah on the Universal Heart Wisdom Show. I am a love coach with Love Coach Academy as well. Big shout out to Scott Thomas. Thank you for the wonderful group of people that you've put together to really support folks in their relationships and in their communication and in their conflicts and in their intimacy. I do work as a transformational relationship coach, and I love helping people work through conflicts because I'm also a trained mediator. So this is really a time where people are finding more and more potential challenges in their home because we're quarantined. So it's a really good time to reach out to someone like Deborah or myself to get support with your home life. If you're feeling extra stress, extra tension, if you're extra ornery and extra crabby with the people you live with, it can be a really good time to work through some of those patterns that are making you feel down and feel stuck and potentially feel aggressive. So we're here for you. And you can also find me on my website, transformintolove.com.
Yes, so we are here for you. We work with individuals and couples, groups, and I will introduce our guest who definitely works with individuals, groups, couples, teams. And I did want to say my Sufi name. As a Sufi healer, my name is Mujiba, which is one of the 99 qualities of God, which is the responsive one. God is ever near and answers our prayers. So this is a time when the more we can tune into our spiritual practices, prayer, and we're going to hear a lot about that from our guest, Dr. Ibrahim Jaffe, who's been my teacher for the last 18 years. And I entered his school. Really, I took Promise back in 2001 and entered the school in 2003. Dr. Ibrahim Jaffe is an intuitive medical MD doctor. He's also a master spiritual healer and the founder of the Institute of Spiritual Healing. He's also a Sufi guide. And so, Ibrahim, I would love for you to talk about how you first got into this amazing work that's so important for us.
All right. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Peace and blessings to your hearts. This is a very strong time, and everybody around the world is struggling, mostly with ourselves, though, of course, a lot of people would say with the election. So we have that going on right now. But in the deep place, and I'm not saying which side I'm for. I'm actually not for any side because as spiritual teachers, we kind of stand in the middle and stay apolitical. But what I would say is that people are struggling in their own sense of what's right and what's not right for themselves and for the world. And we're seeing some really big changes. We're seeing major changes across the board, and racism in the way people view the world, and separation, and all these type of things are going on. So what we really have to do is find, what's true in our own hearts, what's true for ourselves, and also ultimately what's true for God. Like, what does God want? What do we want? And how do those two mix together? So the Sufi teachings are about purification of the self so that we can find love inside our own hearts. And it's after the purification of the self, it's to find love. And after you find love, it's about finding truth. So we have to find the love and truth in our being. And if we find those two things, we can then go on to find the unity, which Deborah spoke about, Mujiba spoke about, which is really what it's all about. It's about the oneness. And now I want to explain that oneness because, unfortunately, it's not the democratic oneness that we see in a circle. It's a different type of oneness. It's a oneness that comes from the one. In other words, how does the one create a state of unity among all people? And this is a different kind of oneness. It's not oneness that we kind of hold hands in a circle and say we're in one circle. Rather, it's oneness that comes from the divine that permeates into the earth, and all of us in our openness to divine oneness, we find oneness with each other. So these teachings are about how we find that oneness with each other. So would you like me to say more, Mujiba, or would you like to ask another question?
That is wonderful. I think Kamila is going to ask you a question now. Thank you.
So we go back a long time. Deborah and I both met Ibrahim many, many years ago, close to 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, actually. 25 years ago for me, I'm just realizing. I was 10 when you first came into my family's life, literally.
Oh my God.
So, the predecessor of the current iterations of your Sufi healing work was an energy mastery school in Sedona, where I believe you worked with something to the tune of 30,000 people with great success, many people getting better and improving in their physical and health conditions. So curious if you could talk about when you met Sidi, the Sufi guide, how your healing work shifted from what it was before Sidi to what it's evolved into now.
Well, a long story short, I began exploring energy when I was in my teens, and became an energy worker and energy healer by my 20s, and then began to sort of develop my own system of healing based on the ability to perceive subtle light. And what I found was that if we could find the subtle light, or what people might call the aura today, of an illness, and we transform the subtle light, that two things would happen. Either the illness would never appear, meaning sometimes we could get the illness out before it showed up. And then if it did appear, it would be very deeply transformed by changing the light. So the whole concept of the Energy Mastery School was find that light and transform it. And I developed something called ART, Awareness Release Technique, to be able to move the light that we would teach people how to find. And we had a tremendous success with that. We were healing, thousands and thousands of people had great change and healing from that type of work. But when I met Sidi, Sidi didn't like that work. And he basically looked at it and said, well, he kind of said, this isn't real healing. And I was like, but Sidi, we got like 30,000 people. We feel things of every disease you can imagine on the planet. He said, yeah, but he said, there's two things I don't like. He said, number one is you're changing the light, but you're not changing them. Mm-hmm. He said, how do you change their hearts and their souls so that you're not just changing the person and they end up being the same or slightly different, but how do you actually change the very nature of their being? And, and that was different. That was a big deal for me. Second thing he said, which was even more profound, was he said, the second thing, the reason I don't like your healing is you're not bringing people closer to God, closer to the unity. So he said, in my book, if you don't change their heart and their soul and bring them closer to the unity, your healing is just an adjustment that doesn't really change the being. And for me, I can't call it real healing. Huh. Yeah, it was a really profound teaching. And I sat with that for a long time. And you hate to admit that somebody else is right. But, especially when you got a big school and you're doing all this stuff. We were, everything was big and very much about the self, and he was very clear about that. He's like, you've got to let go of yourself and you've got to let go of what you're doing. And he said, do you want to learn the real water of truth, or do you want to continue adjusting the energy, and basically keeping people the same, and I thought about that and made the decision to essentially put myself under his foot. I said, okay, you go ahead and crush me, crush my ego, crush my heart and soul, whatever you want to do to me, you do it, with one thing, that you help me to find the truth. I said, you crush whatever you want, but I want to find the truth. And he said, I'd be happy to take that one on. So that was over 20 years ago, and it has been an amazing journey with him.
Wow. So, that is so amazing. I love your sincerity and your willingness to be humbled, many, many different times. And really, yeah, I remember when CD once said, the door to mastery is really, you got to go down through the lowest little door. It's not like, not like something for your ego. It's like bow down on the floor. And the great Sufi saying, kneel and just kiss the ground. I mean, really, it is so much about emptying so that we can be filled. So for true healing to occur, it's useful for people to get the lesson. I know that people need to really get the lesson about why they got sick in the first place, and to have spiritual alignment for optimal health and well-being. Can you talk about that and talk about Sufism more, how this applies to advanced healing?
Well, I mean, I think today, for example, if you go into a lot of the healing conferences, what people are sort of doing is they're shifting the energy in some way. It could be through Reiki, it could be through auric healing, or things like this. Essentially what you're doing is you're shifting the energy field. And that's all fine. Like I said, although from CD's perspective, it's all about adjusting the energy field. It's not changing the person. Actually, I just lost your question. I'm sorry. It just flew right out of my head. What was the question?
Yeah, I know. That's like, I've always said that's when we just expand in the light and our mind disappears. So that's fine. So I was really asking about the whole thing that you teach about, for true healing to occur, we need to get the lesson. And you might want to talk about, a peer and Sufism.
Yeah. Okay, beautiful, good. All right, so after that whole system, CD said something to me very profound, which is, he said that the healing of disease is in the images, and what that meant was that hidden within the subconscious there were images that were creating illness, and that if we could get to the images, we could heal disease. So I would say about 5-10 years of studying with him, essentially what we were doing was working in the realm of the malakut, which is the angelic realm or the subtle worlds, to be able to get to these images that were causing illness. And it was very effective. We had a lot of change. We were seeing really deep, profound healing with people. However, I personally wasn't seeing healing of life-threatening illnesses. Like, those things seemed to kind of I would miss it. And of course, during that time, my wife, Nada, got cancer, very aggressive stomach cancer, and she died very quickly. And of course, I didn't have the knowledge to heal her. And of course, CD was saying that this was her time, and there was really nothing I could really do anyways. So, I remember after she died, which happened very quickly over about 3 weeks, I sat down and I started thinking, I really want to figure out, there must be a way to work with healing at a deeper level, at a level where, life-threatening disease, cancer, type of thing could be healed. So that became my search. And it really took me, I would say, about 5 or 6 years to make any real progress with it. But eventually we started to sort of broach into that world. And I don't want to say that we're doing that instead of, conventional medicine, chemoradiation, because I'm not. I think it's a system that works well with those things. And some people choose not to do it, and they do it, alternatively, and it works well that way as well. So I just want to remind everybody that it's not about leaving. You don't have to leave leave conventional medicine. But what we found was that if you get to what I call the impressions, which are the images that essentially block the soul, and you're able to release those images so that the soul becomes essentially re-energized or reinvigorated, that we would then see life-threatening diseases begin to disappear for the first time. So we started, and that for me happened with congestive heart failure. My first patient, she was struggling with CHF, congestive heart failure. She was very serious. She was like 6 months away from death. The heart slowly failing. I did the images and the malakut, the first level of healing. And then all of a sudden, the light opened up and I began to see the subtle impressional images in the soul. And they were very different than the other ones. In other words, the ones in the malakut were about her relationship to her religion and a broken heart and essentially what had failed in her life. But in the soul, what we found that the real teachings were essentially about her anger at God, about how the soul had turned away from God, how the soul was constricting El-Hay, the life force that was moving through her body. And when we were able to get the impressions off the soul, which had to do with very, very early confusion and misunderstandings of God itself, the soul opened up and became reinvigorated with the divine names. It began to be filled. And as it did that, very shortly after that, she called me about 2 weeks later, and she said, "You can't believe it. I went back to get my testing, and all of my functions have returned to normal. My heart's normal size, my ejection fraction's normal, every single thing turned to normal." So what I learned from that was that when you're healing very deep diseases, you work with the malakut, which is more the heart level. You work with the Jabarut, which is the soul level. You work with unveiling these subtle images in both places, and you get the teachings. The teachings are, what does God want us to know? And there's ways of finding that out. What does God ask for us to learn to heal or take a disease from us? And I find if we do all those things and protect the person, with conventional medicine, or she needed to stay on her CHF medicine until the healing happened. Once it happened, she didn't need it anymore. Okay, and so we want to use conventional medicine to support the process, and then we work at the deeper level to heal what's going on.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and it's important to let everyone know in the world of healers, we are still medical doctors such as yourself and still believe in Western medicine as an important part of the whole picture.
There's a lot of separation going on, the doctors don't like the spiritual and the spiritual don't like the doctors. And, the truth is that actually there are two hands that are part of healing. And we need to work with all of them and not create negativity with any of them.
I love that perspective.
Yeah.
So you mentioned CD a few times, and I just want to create the context for that for our listeners who don't know who CD is. So could you give a brief introduction of who CD is and maybe briefly how he's impacted your life?
Well, CD was a Sufi sheikh from Jerusalem. At that time, he was head of the Shadaliya order of Jerusalem, and part of the higher Sufi councils in that area and in the world. He was a very high-ranking Sufi. He's also just an incredibly down-to-earth human being. And so when you met him, you had the sense of incredible light, but you also had the ability to meet somebody and be talking to him as a friend. And that was really an unusual relationship, because most time when you're with masters, you basically, there's a lot of separation, there's a lot of ritual and, bowing and all that type of stuff. And with CD, none of that existed. It was just, say hi and say hello. But behind it, he really was one of the very high masters in Sufism on the planet. And, I think he had decided he wanted to bring Sufism to the West. And that's when we met him. He was on the process of bringing these teachings to the West. That's when I met him. That's when your parents met him, Kamela, and so forth like that.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
So much richness here. Yeah, and when you mentioned the divine names, I wanted to say that refers to the 99 qualities of God, and actually there's even more, or of Allah. That part of the healing is calling in these divine qualities. So maybe you could talk more about that, with healing, our spiritual alignment, how we call in the divine qualities, and that many times people might have, say with the example of strength, somebody might have a certain kind of earthly, worldly strength or an ego strength, but to wash it clean and call in divine strength. So just could you speak about that, or about the divine qualities?
Okay, well, in Sufism, we have 99 names of God. They're called Asma al-Husna. Asma al-Husna means the beautiful names of God. And they start with Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, which are compassion and mercy. And, so does the Bible and the Torah. If you read a lot of the chapters, they begin with, in the name of God, the compassionate and the merciful. So that's the beginning. In my understanding, that is the beginning of the divine nature, compassion and mercy. Now, what we find is that if somebody, because of the structure of self, blocks a name, let's say Ar-Rahman, compassion, or Al-Wadud, love, these are two big ones, then what happens is the impressions, the images, the experiences restrict the light. So, for example, let's say that you're born, you're wide open, full of love, right? And then you have a bad experience. What do? You shut your heart, right? And you back away from love because it's too painful. So what you've done, in essence, is constricted the downpouring of love, right? Now, that may not seem like such a big deal, and it might not be when you're 20 or 30 years old. But if you continue to carry that, then when you're 50 or 60, you're going to see that compression of love, that constriction of love, will cause heart disease. And people are going to get sick from it. And, the ideal is, ideally, you want to essentially open up the flow of love. You want the wadud to come down. What love is the major cause of heart disease, or the constriction of love is the major cause of heart disease. By the same token, Rahman, which is compassion, is sort of one of the major keys of all liver diseases. So if you block the compassion, then you will not be compassionate. You will get angry. And when you get angry, you inflame the liver. When you inflame the liver, you get liver disease. So these type of things are very much connected to organ systems. So in Sufism, the concept is you want to build the house of God inside of you. And build the house of God inside your heart means that you build a house made of the 99 names inside of your heart. So you carry the Rahman of God, you carry the Rahim of God, you carry the Wadud of God. And each time that you purify some of that in yourself, your heart becomes luminescent with those lights. In time, you have this luminescent temple built of the 99 names inside of your heart. When you build that, you will find that your relationship to God is extremely, extremely close. God makes you, when you have that temple built, God says, now you're really my true beloved. And God gets very, very close to you. And that's the highest level. We call that the level of divine perfection. When that occurs, you become a perfect master. Okay, so the idea is you build that house, and Sufism is about building that house, moving towards one becoming a perfect master. Okay, now, in healing, the other side of it is that, what happens if you block that light? For example, one of the lights that comes into our head, people know that the crown chakra is about knowledge, right? So normally this part is where your brain, your cortex, has regular knowledge, but if you open the center, then you receive wisdom and divine knowledge. So closed, you're smart, open, you're wise, right? Okay, what happens if you block that thing? So, for example, in epilepsy, what we see is that there are certain types of blockages that can close off the crown. It causes some type of misfunctioning in the brain. People end up with grand mal seizures. No, not always, because you can have an injury. An injury is a different story. But if you don't have an injury, and sometimes, certain genetic things that will change it, frequently those grand mals may be due to some type of blockage that has come in through an energetic shifting of that light up there. Mm-hmm. So if we go in, and we've done this where if you go in and you are able to reestablish the correct light in the head, very often you may see either resolution of the grand mals or the decreasing of grand mal seizures. Hmm. You see, so it's really fascinating. But if you really look at it deeply, what did you really do? You opened up the attribute of El Alim, divine knowing, which was blocked and now causing seizures, but you opened it, the Alim came back in, and then your seizures became less. You see it? So that's how in healing, the names work with shifting its relationship to the body or the mind. In the spirit, you have to build El Alim as the dome, one of the domes of the heart. The heart has domes. And one of the domes of the heart is divine knowledge. It's a high dome of the heart. So you build it inside yourself.
Wow.
So beautiful.
It sounds like there's a combination of a few elements that help people be really effective healers and practitioners in this way. One I'm hearing is using these names, these qualities of God that help open certain energies, certain lights, and create transformation. And I'm just inferring here that there's got to be some attunement to spiritual guidance and to clairvoyance. So how do you navigate that world, and how do you teach people to develop those skills?
Well, first of all, again, in this system, everything is done through God's light. So we start with God's light. God lights illuminate what needs to be healed. The healing happens with God's lights. It brings in God's names, and then we return everything back to God. So the entire system is a God-based system. To see, for example, subtle worlds, you have to use subtle light. We have an attribute called al-basir. Basir is inner sight. If you want to work with sight, you work with al-basir. If you want to work with enlightenment, a lot of people trying to enlighten their minds, you can work with an-nur. These attributes open certain centers in your being and cause those centers to perceive subtle worlds. So, we work with those qualities and unveiling those qualities so people, can have certain things. We're not so interested in clairvoyance. What we are interested in is the ability to people to feel truthfully from their heart. In other words, if you felt that person with epilepsy, you don't have to see what's blocking their crown. But if you feel it, you would actually be able to feel what's going on up there. You would feel it as something very uncomfortable sitting on their head. Your heart would hurt. And as you tuned into it with your heart, you'd actually be able to identify what was blocking their head, and you were able to work with it. So, we're not trying to teach people to see the unseen, but what we are trying to teach them to do is be able to feel the subtle realities of the imaginal worlds so that they can work with clearing them.
Beautiful.
Yeah, very beautiful. Yes, guidance is so important, because every step of the way we're making choices that are leading us on our path. And in Sufism, we talk about walking, that we are walking on the path. And every step of the way, it's where are we walking? What are we choosing? And then there's a whole thing about, really breaking the images or transforming them, I guess is how we're talking about it lately. So you're about to open up healing clinics, and can you talk about what you're going to do, since there's the whole COVID regulations and shelter in place? Are you going to do healing clinics online first?
Well, we were in the process of opening up a clinic in Florida. Unfortunately, with COVID hit. So, we're doing it all online, and we're finding that the results are the same. We're not actually finding any real difference. The clinic is basically three pieces. We, first of all, have healing with this system of Sufi healing, which I call the APIR system, APIIRTB, APIR, which is a mnemonic, which I'll explain in a few minutes. And then secondly, we have people like Deborah, who will come in and look at your Mujiba and look at your, your diet, your nutrition, your herbs, those type of things, and kind of fine tune that for you. And then the third thing is that we want to teach you to self-heal through the foundations of spiritual healing. So we'll teach you the APIR system, and then you'll start applying that yourself. It's a wonderful system, and you'll be able to use it every day. So the combination of those three things will set you on your way. And God willing, inshallah, when you're done with that week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you'll be ready to kind of take your healing in your own hands.
Yes. Do you want to explain what APIR is, what that acronym stands for?
Well, APIR is a mnemonic. It means APIR teaches beautifully, APIR TB. A stands for alignment with God, and P stands for the subtle pattern that you find, like what's blocking the head in the seizure disorder, that you can feel it. The I are the hidden images. The issues are actually the more subtle impressions and battles going on inside the person, that, like maybe they're fighting, like this woman was fighting with God. That was the impressions were her childhood, where she fought with God because, I guess I can tell you, she had been looking at a picture of Jesus, and Jesus was bleeding and on the cross, and had the nails in his arms, and she couldn't resolve it in herself. She got negative about it. So she went into sort of a battle with religion and God. Why would God do this, and so forth and so on. And so you have your issues. Your T are the teachings. What is the teachings? Which is really that God is unconditionally loving and completely compassionate and merciful, not, violent or anything else, that these were misconceptions. And the beautification was when she was able to forgive and let go of the misunderstanding and understand that in truth, God was the love and only the love. Mm-hmm. And when she understood that, that's actually what healed the heart. It was when she fully embodied God as love. You see, so the APIR TB system is basically a 7-step system for walking through yourself. Whatever it is going on inside of you that's causing problems. If you're having trouble finding work, I promise you there's something inside of you blocking it. If you're having trouble making money, there's something inside of you blocking it. You've got to find those places inside yourself and transform them. But the highest is to transform your own soul so that you can come into the state of divine unity and oneness. And that's really our goal. This is the goal of all human beings, to come home. That's the real home. Everything else is a temporary home.
Yes. Yeah, we are spiritual beings having a human experience and really coming home. Yes. Walking each other home is so important. And I want to say something about the nutrition, because you mentioned it, that it really is about cleaning our body temple out. There's a lot of food out there that the head of the company I work with Superfoods calls it Frankenfood. I mean, there's some pretty, and so but we can make it very delicious and very pleasant and very enjoyable to do this. So it's something that people actually enjoy when they get on more alive, dense nutrients. We make delicious shakes. We're going to help you with recipes and really great meal plans, and bringing more of the fruits and vegetables that were created by the creator that created us, and so these alive fruits and vegetables with enzymes and pure kinds of proteins, or but it's pretty exciting what we're doing with the clinics. So yes, and this journey in life. I've many times called it the school of life. It is a place we didn't come here just to have, just to, I don't know. It isn't just a playground. It's an it's a whole realm to wake up in, and then there's so much more fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see.
I'm going to bring in a question from the audience, if that's all right with you.
Oh, perfect, Kamila.
Okay, so thanks, Karen and Janice, for your comments. And we have a question from Jay. So the question here, Ibrahim, for you is, do the Sufis believe in an age of peace, a golden age, and when does that happen?
That's a great question, Jay. I would say it's happening. We're in it. I think this is the time it's happening. But, before it happens, we have to go through, the whole, I don't know what you call it, we call it the ending times, but the ending of this cycle where, we have to go through the Christ Antichrist thing and then basically walk through that. And then at the end of that, then we get the establishment of that golden age. So the Sufis actually are right there with the Christians and actually the Jews as well about, this time being an ending time, then the Christ reappearing, and then the golden age establishing. Now, how long that lasts, nobody knows for sure. There's talks about, 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years. Nobody knows. But we do know, or we believe, that it's in the process of happening. In the Sufi tradition, there's like 140 signs that indicate the ending time scenario. We've had about 138 of them. So we're pretty much there at this point. Great question. Thank you.
Yeah, Ibrahim, Jay Mayer is actually a friend of mine that I've known since my 20s. And we were in a spiritual group of friends back in Santa Cruz way long ago. And he does something called Light Touch, where it's all about invoking the Archangels and invoking really blessings and prayers. And Jay cares a lot about getting this out to the world. And I know you talked a lot about the Archangels or the angels and the different levels of angels last time in one of our classes. Can you say something about calling in goals and prayers and angels, whatever comes to your heart?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, for the Sufis, we want to work within the God stream. And the God stream, we believe are God itself, which we call the essence or the essential reality. And then we have the prophets, or avatars as people may call them, which are these really descents that come into form of very high divine light. And then we have the archangels, and the archangels, of course, are incredibly beautiful, powerful beings that can bring immense healing, and they bring incredibly beautiful healing. So in our system, all the angels, archangels, and all the angels that come below that, angels, devas, things like that, are all really, really important part of healing. And any one of them can be used, although we prefer it if always it's being done under the umbrella of the God's light and God's essence. So as long as God's essence is there, I'm absolutely 100% behind healing with the angels and the archangels and all the above.
So Ibrahim, can you say to somebody who's very much wanting to get this kind of work out there, how somebody like Jay would really know when he's working in, when God's guiding the work, or when it's a good idea for himself? How does somebody really monitor that?
You broke up a little bit, but I think the way we teach it is when you learn to use certain sacred names of God, divine names, then those names call in a very specific light, which we call the divine essence. Once you start contacting the essence the essence begins to reveal to you, first of all, that it exists. Secondly, that what you get from it turns out to be truthful. You'll see that it actually tells you the truth. And then it will start to show you where your own self is veiling the truth itself. And because, we all have issues with that. So nobody thinks that you're beyond, having some issues with the self, because everybody has self issues. We all do. And the divine is perfect, but we're imperfect. And in that imperfection, we have to be willing to look at the places in ourselves that need to be transformed. That's what our human lives are about. And so when we bring God's light in, God's going to show all of us our weaknesses and the places that we need to be healed. So that's how you know, because you might be healing with an archangel, or you might be healing with an angel, but at times you might not be. At times you might get caught by your own self, or you might get caught by other things, shadows and things. And so when those things happen, it needs to be some way to come back to the truth itself. That was why, for me, having Sidi, who was a perfect master, there to really refine and really crush my own ego as often as he could, was a good thing. Because if you don't have that, if you don't have somebody to kind of watch you, it's very easy for the self to come in and catch you. And this is why it's important to have, sort of a feedback mechanism, whether it be a perfect master or whether it be a group, people around you to kind of say, hey, wait a minute, that might not be enlightenment right there. That might be something else, to call you. And I want you to know, even those people that believe that you've reached enlightenment is not a completely perfect state itself. That's the thing that people misunderstand. That's what we've seen this century with a number of enlightened masters having fallen down. Why? Because Allah, God, was trying to show people that enlightenment is an imperfect state. It's not complete until one completely perfects oneself, which is a much, much, much higher state than enlightenment itself.
Yes. And so I guess we have to stay very humble and very much doing daily prayers and meditation, daily prayers to keep walking. So could you mention just the 28 stations of the heart, because they're such great teachings there about learning not to listen to the temptations and the evil whisper, but to keep, progressing to how we're listening to that pure, still voice inside.
Well, I mean, Mujiba, she, her family has been involved with Vedantic approaches to spirituality. And of course, Sufi and Vedanta are actually very close to each other in a lot of ways. Vedanta is polytheistic and Sufism is monotheistic, but the stations of walking are the same, except in the Vedantic system, they're moving through the mind, and in the Sufi system, we're moving through the heart. So we both talk about 7 stations, and the 7 stations start with the self, which is, the self that we follow our shadow impulses, our body impulses, what our bodies want, where we follow our lusts, we follow our passions, we follow our needs for food. And this is a lot of what the first station is about. And of course, I would say in the West, we've perfected the first station. We're really good at it over here. But it also has a downside, which is it's very easy to get caught by it and not get out. In other words, you can follow your lust, to your 70 or 80, and then you're finished. So that's the first station. The second station is about following your heart. And it's really your heart being whole and full of love and full of beauty and full of the deepest respect for oneness and the deepest respect for others. It's where your heart. It's not just about what my heart wants. It's about kind of what Mujib is talking about, universal heart. It's about all hearts. It's like, how do we care for everybody, and what's the value? And that's what we're starting to see, coming into the world scene right now, as people are saying, hey, no longer okay to make separations. No longer okay to treat a black person badly because they're black, It's no longer okay to, go after a Chinese or a Muslim or somebody because they're different. And I love that. I think that's all part of second station teachings. The third station teachings, of course, are about what you might call universal or cosmic consciousness. It's about the nature of the soul. It's about the eternal nature of life. It's about the 99 names. It's about traveling through the cosmos and being able to experience the attributes of God as they essentially form existence. Mm-hmm. The fourth station is about what we call Hakika. Hakika means the station of divine truth. And it's about having the ability to recognize the truth of God, the essential reality of God, and to live in the essence. This is part of enlightenment is part of this station. Enlightenment happens in the fourth station. The fifth station is what we call station of Baka, the station of subsistence. This is where your attributes are literally replaced by the divine attributes, so that you become subsiding in divine light. You're anchored in the divine attributes. So this is really what I would call a wisdom. You're now becoming a wisdom master. I also call these people saints. This is the nature of sainthood. And then the sixth station, of course, is the Baka Bila. And the Baka Bila is the true wisdom master. This is when not only has the heart completely opened and formed this beautiful circle around you, but the mind and the crown open, and you get this beautiful, you see these pictures of masters with these circles around them.
Halo.
In the Baka, what is it?
Like halos.
Halos.
Halos. Yeah.
The halos. The sixth station, you start to have that upper halo formed. It's not complete. You're still a little bit. And then the seventh station is the station of Al-Kamal, the station of perfection. This is when you complete all these circles. The wisdom opens up in like immense wisdom. And often Allah, for some, not everyone, not all perfect masters have that, but some, Allah gives perfect healing through them. They get, and also powers, such as ability to bilocate or translocate or travel with the body, things like this. These things happen in that seventh station that you hear about. So these are some of the walking of the seven stations that you can walk through, and really, hopefully, you will.
So that really shows how deep the walking is. The walking is very deep and very sincere. So,
yes.
Kamila, please ask what you would love to ask.
Yeah, well, I heard you talking about CD as an important element for Sufis to have someone who can help keep them on the path and help check them when their ego's at play, right? And so for those of us that were following CD or are following CD, he passed away a few years ago. So if you can speak to what is it like now after the spiritual guide has passed away, and are there different ways in which we practice or seek guidance or suggestions for folks that might not know how to navigate their spiritual life as well once their teacher has passed away?
Well, first of all, Sidi left an immense body of knowledge. There's, I don't know how many books that cover every single aspect of those seven stations. So, the writings are there if you need it. Secondly, in our system, again, we have many muqaddams. Muqaddams are really people who've walked very deeply and can guide people, towards the unity and the oneness in a very deep way. We have over 300 in our tariqah. And then we have something called murshids. Murshids are real spiritual guides. They have the ability to walk the soul into the unity and beyond that, and we have, 4 in our order. I'm one of those. And then of course, even among the murshids, in times God may choose to make, one of them a true guide. A guide, of course, is, bring them into the seventh station. And we have those that are in the process of that as well. So this tariqah, it's not that it's gone. Nobody will ever be Sidi, or some of the great masters, Abdul Qadir Jilani, Ibn Arabi. These people are just beyond. But at the same time, the teachings are there to really walk people, certainly into the unity and the Baka, and for some, maybe even further into the Baka Bila and Al-Kamal.
Really beautiful. Thank you. So let's bring it back to sort of present day, the work that you're doing. After, say, COVID era lifts, do you plan on having a brick and mortar healing school or location clinic?
That's our plan. In fact, not only just one, but our plan is we would like to actually have many clinics throughout the world. We are training both master healers and also master teachers, Mokadams, and Murshids. So we have people being trained, and our hope is that in time we'll have many, many centers throughout the world teaching people both these processes, the healing and the walking together, which can be done in these small retreat centers worldwide.
Nice.
Brick and mortar.
Brick and mortar.
Yeah. Brick and mortar. Yes, that is very exciting. Wow. Kamila, do you want to ask anything else?
Sure. For folks listening that may not be walking the Sufi path, people might be interested in the Sufi path. So what would be a beginning or a first step that you would suggest people explore, or a book they buy, or a person they contact? How would someone begin if they wanted to do more, learn more?
Well, if you'd like to learn, you can go to, I would recommend, I can see across the board here, you could go to courses at drjaffemd.com or my website, drjaffemd.com. You can also go to sufi.net, which is our Sufi circle. There's a little bit more Sufi, deeper Sufi teachings where both myself and Slima Edelstein and Kamela Shenman, who are all sort of masters in this way, will meet with you and teach you about Sufism. You can go to Sufi.
We're losing your audio a little bit, Ibrahim.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, just back up a sentence or two. Thank you.
Yeah, you can go to, I don't know where, sufi.net for Sufi teachings. You can go to drjaffemd.com for the healing and the introduction to Sufi teachings. Or you can go to sufiuniversity.org. And all those will help you to look into anything that you'd like. But our initial programs are sufi.net and the drjaffemd.com.
Wonderful. So there really is a continuity. Yeah, I realized that CD really trained you very, very deeply, knowing that he was old, at the time. And I mean, he was older, and I think he knew his time was coming to pass over. And I think he really, deeply wanted you to carry on the teachings. And so you're doing that, which is very noble. I know it takes profound focus. And it's exciting that you've moved to Florida, that you're here in Florida. And I moved here to Florida, so I'd be closer to you to be able to work with the clinics. And that's exciting. Sometimes God really does move us around the board to get us in new places to work with new people. Can you say something to that as we begin to wrap up?
I don't know. It seems to me a lot of people are getting guidance to move this way right now. I've heard of a lot of people coming to Florida. God knows California is just getting hit hard with the fires and whatever's going on. I think it's a cleansing. There's a deep cleansing and a deep purification going on in California. I'm personally very happy not to be in those fires myself right now. Florida has its own challenges, but it is a very beautiful area, and you have to look in your hearts. And you have to see where God is directing you. If God calls you here, you should come. Go where you're being called in your heart to go, because that's where you're meant to be. Can't be anyplace else.
That is so true. I mean, I have always felt that way since I was born into a spiritual family. I was really guided spiritually as a child. And luckily my mother had studied comparative religious studies, so she taught me all about the unity and all about listening to, the real true guidance. And so I remember when I was like 24, I mean, something like made me go from Cambridge, Massachusetts to California, and it was beyond my mind for sure. And I've been guided around, and now I was guided here, and it takes a lot of trust and faith. And it's also great because when you move, you really clean up everything. I did so much pruning and let go of so much stuff and lighten the load so I can listen even deeper. So I do encourage people, to really pray to be guided, pray to be working with the highest teachings possible, and pray to understand universal, this deep wisdom. And so I want to thank you, Ibrahim. I want to thank you so much for your work and for being on this show today and for all that you share. And I love being I'm in year 4 advanced healing with Ibrahim in his school. And it's profound if anybody wants really, to dive into very deep teachings. And I know that you have another show that you're jumping on to that starts in about 4 minutes. So if you need to go to that, I'm going to jump on that too, where you're going to be, and that's part of Sufi Circle, or what is that?
Yeah, we actually have half hour. There's a half hour break in there, but
oh, there's a half hour break. Okay, great.
We're okay. Yeah.
Then we don't have to rush. Then we can relax and take a deep breath. And we want you out there to know that you can come to this show every Thursday. It's at 3 p.m. in California and 6 p.m. East Coast. We do it every Thursday. Kamila is going to be here for one more show next time, and she'll be announcing who that guest is going to be. And then I will be continuing on and having a new co-host. So I love it that you're here, and please keep coming to Universal Heart Wisdom. And we want to thank again Scott Thomas and the Love Coach Academy and all the teachings around compassionate communications and empathy and the way that we work with couples and relationships, and that Kamila and I combine the Sufi teachings with it, which takes it very deep. So thank you very much. And Kamila, would you like to announce the show for next week?
Certainly. Thank you so much, Ibrahim. It's wonderful to see you and to spend time with you, brother. And I'm so appreciative for the myriad influences you've had on my life, starting with training my parents to be healers when I was 10, and then eventually training me when I was 17. I was in 4 years of the Sufi University Healing School that exactly overlapped my 4 years of college. So every quarter of college classes, I would leave for a week to go to healing school and immerse myself in that world. And then I'd have my healing school homework and my college classes homework, and did that completely for 4 years. And so grateful that I had such really powerful, sound healing work and spiritual training in my younger formative years, because it's really made a pathway for me to deepen those spiritual practices as an adult. And Sufism has always meant so much to me and continues to mean so much to me. So I'm very grateful for your presence in my life.
And happy to see how you've turned out so beautiful. So it goes both ways.
Thank you. I was babysitting Ibrahim's kids when they were literally in diapers.
Exactly.
Oh, how sweet. I love Ibrahim's kids. I love being in relationship with them.
Yes. Absolutely.
So who's on for next week?
So for next week, we're going to have a very amazing friend and healer type, and true to our topics, Universal Heart Wisdom. We'll have Johnny Vajra, and he is also in Florida, actually. He's a spiritual alchemist, an intimacy coach, and a sex educator. And he incorporates sacred sexuality and mindful meditation to promote conscious community through workshops and immersion experiences. He's a certified Reiki master and a Theta healing practitioner. And we're really looking forward to having him on next week for another exciting conversation.
Yay, great. So everybody, please tune in next week, and it will be at 6 p.m. East Coast time, 3 p.m. California time. And I always have announcements on my page. Kamila will have them on her page for next week. And we are announced on the Love Coach Academy. So have a blessed week and be good to yourself. Give yourself a lot of self-love and self-care, and see you next week.
Yay. Aho.
Aho.
Bye, everyone.